Hello, everyone. I hope you're well. Time flows relentlessly, a bit like water. Castles and mansions, lovers and enemies, whole empires. In its rivers and streams, it takes what's present into the past. Some things, however, have such a powerful emotional load, such a strong emotive power, burdened with pain and hope and despair and betrayal, that they can't be dragged away. They choose to linger. Our story takes place in the mid-1500s in Scotland, a land at the time torn between traditional Catholicism and the new Protestant religion brought on by the schism of the Church of England from the Church of Rome, King Henry VIII at the head of it. Located in Fife, perched on a cliff overlooking the North Sea, St Andrew's Castle was built in the 13th century by Bishop de Beaumont and had been a stronghold of the Church of Rome. Plenty of blood was spilled among the ancient halls, but perhaps the most gruesome fate any enemy of the church could come across there was the bottle dungeon. The bottle dungeon was a former cellar and pantry dug into the rock, forming the shape of a huge upright bottle. It was accessible only via rope down an 11-foot or 3.5-meter deep well from the neck of the so-called bottle. It had no other way out and no windows. It was only a matter of time before this space was used to hold prisoners. Imagine being alone in total darkness and deafening silence, fear taking hold every time the trapdoor was opened, not knowing what would be next and what you'd have to suffer before your life was over. Place soaked in anguish and sadness, where in our period many religious dissenters were held. A very famous Protestant preacher of the day who was held in the bottle dungeon was George Wishart. Cardinal David Beaton believed that he was a spy for Henry VIII, so he had him arrested, and after a token trial chaired by Cardinal Beaton himself, George Wishart was imprisoned in the bottle dungeon, awaiting execution. Cardinal Beaton was known for his hatred and persecution of Protestants and heretics, and the cruelty with which he disposed of them. On the 1st of March, 1546, the trapdoor sealing the bottle dungeon was opened. George Wishart was taken from his dark and silent prison. Two executioners dressed him with a black linen shirt and tied numerous bags of gunpowder to every part of his body. They erected a scaffold in the centre of the court of the castle and prepared the wood. He was to be burnt alive, loaded with gunpowder. When he was led out to his fate, he couldn't but notice the windows and balconies around the scaffold were draped in tapestry and adorned with cushions, so that the cardinal and his entourage could comfortably enjoy the sight of the torturous death of an innocent man. In a display of his power, the cardinal ensured that a great guard of soldiers be present and that brass guns be placed all over the castle. The trumpets sounded and George Wishart was tied to the stake. The wood was lit and the fire took hold of his body and ignited the gunpowder. The cardinal was so pleased with the man's grueling screams of agony that he exhorted him to be of good cheer and to ask for God's forgiveness. It was at this moment that George Wishart spoke words which would later be regarded as prophetic. He replied to the cardinal's sneer, "This flame occasions trouble to my body indeed, but it hath in no wise broken my spirit. But he who now looks down so proudly upon me from yonder lofty place," and pointed to the cardinal, "shall ere long be ignominiously thrown down, as now he proudly lolls knees." The flames devoured his body. Prophetic words unsettled the prelates who were present. Many, as a matter of fact, were worried with limiting the repercussions such executions may bring along. The cardinal wasn't touched. He was pleased with himself for having defeated yet another enemy of the Church of Rome. George Wishart's cruel execution stirred anger and discontent among Protestant reformers. Cardinal Beaton was known for both his excesses and his cruelty, and they had just had enough. On May 29, 1546, Norman Leslie, Master of Rhodes, with 4 groups of men and Fifeshire lairds, approached the castle at dawn. Pretending to be stonemasons or to have an appointment with the cardinal, they gained entry, killing the porter and the guards. The servants working at the castle were allowed to leave, and the men quietly approached the cardinal's chambers, where the cardinal was still sleeping. The men forced their way in to find a startled Beaton begging for mercy, the same mercy he denied to all the innocent souls he condemned to an atrocious death. He was stabbed repeatedly, his body mutilated while still in his bedchamber. In the meantime, word had spread about what had been happening at the castle, and before long, Provost James Learmont of Darcy, a supporter of Cardinal Beaton, had gathered about 400 men and had taken them to the castle, where they demanded to know the fate of their beloved cardinal. As a reply, Beaton's naked and bloodied body was hung by an arm and a leg from the very same window where he had relished at the countless executions he had ordered, his body ironically in the shape of a human St. Andrew's cross. The Protestants were at last in control of the castle and were in no hurry to see Beaton receive an honourable burial. His body was pickled, some say salted, and was held in the Bottle Dungeon, the same dungeon where George Wishart and other countless people whose only fault was that of believing a different religion were held until their end. His burial was eventually arranged in secret, and he was laid to rest in Kilrenny Kirkyard. The restless ghost of Cardinal Beaton was spotted numerous times, wearing his blood-red robe and beretta, looking out from the window where he used to gloat at the executions and where his body was finally hung, in the chamber where he met his end, in the long corridors of his castle, now in ruins. A written account appeared in an article by the National Observer on January the 7th, 1893. Years before, on the evening of midsummer, Freemasons were resting by the drawbridge within the castle ruins while waiting for a friend. When they heard footsteps approaching, they thought their mate had arrived, but to their surprise, a figure appeared wearing a flowing red gown and a big red hat. Initially, the men mistook the figure for that of a woman, but when he approached, they realized it was that of a man, a very silent man, with a distant stare, unconscious of their presence. His ghastly face, burdened by immense sadness, stared out to sea. He then moved slowly and slowly descended the opposite staircase, and when the puzzled men tried to reach him, he had disappeared. Cardinal Beaton is not the only presence inhabiting the ruins of St. Andrew's Castle. George Wishart was also spotted numerous times, standing in horror on the spot where he was burnt alive, or in the early 1960s, standing on the road and looking with an intense stare towards the castle. When suffering, both moral and physical, is taken to such an extreme, the energy and the emotions leave deep traces, furrows, scars that not even the tides of time can wash away. Who knows what other silent, restless beings dwelled between the ancient ruins of St. Andrew's Castle. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like and comment to support the channel and help it grow. Until next time.